Who is going to speak to the slides? But the context where, when am I going to speak to the context? Beginning, no. Okay.
Understanding the textile-based crisis in Bangalore. I'm Pinky Chandran, the moderator for today's discussion, and I'm pleased to introduce the panel for today's discussion. First up, Krishna, who's a dry waste collection center operator at Ward 112 in Domlur, and Krishna also made an EPR video on cloth waste for the COP26. So, and then we have Trina Roy, who is from Circular Apparel Innovation Factory, or CAIF, and we have Nalini Shekar, who needs no introduction and is the co-founder for Hasiru Dala. Unfortunately, Mr. Sarfraz Khan, Joint Commissioner BBMP, sends his regrets that he couldn't make it for this webinar. So to start with, if I might take you back to 1939, it was at the 8th Annual Herald Tribune Forum on Current Problems, sponsored by the New York Herald Tribune, at an event that drew over 3,000 women club members. There was a list of prominent speakers, and one such was Dr. Charles, who was the vice president of DuPont, who mounted the podium to share some thoughts about plastic. And he said, I quote, "Plastics are to be regarded as a new material rather than a substitute for old material. Look about your automobile and your home, and you will find a variety of fabricated articles made from plastic. For example, beautiful and durable tableware, toothbrush handles, costume jewelry, unbreakable tableware, electrical appliances, lighting equipments, buttons, buckles, scuffless shoe heels, etc." And he said to the audience, and I'm quoting, "I'm making the first announcement of a brand new chemical textile fiber. The first man-made organic textile fiber prepared entirely from new materials from the mineral kingdom. I refer to the fiber produced from nylon. Though wholly fabricated from such common raw materials as coal, water, and air, nylon can be fashioned from filaments as strong as steel, as fine as spider's web, yet more elastic than any of the other common natural fibers and possessing a beautiful luster." Well, we've come a long way from the 1930s, when nylon captured a significant portion of the industrial yarn and fabric world, to when polyester arrived in 1970s and conquered the textile world, furnishing fabrics, upholstery, fishing nets, umbrella cloth, floor carpets, everything. I mean, you name it and it's everything, right from polyester wool and woolen, polyester viscose, and polyester cotton fabrics. Well, we've come a long way, and how? Cloth and clothing were never just thrown out as rubbish in India, as there were always stories or sentimental value about each piece of garment. It was either gifted or used up or exchanged for something more desirable. In fact, in 1939, Stalibras also said that Indian society is still partially a cloth economy, where cloth is both a currency and a means of incorporation, which has profound implications for disposal practice. But since the 1990s, all this has changed. And Nalini, may I please invite you to talk briefly about the recycle culture that existed in India and the role of waste pickers in enabling that support system, and of course the changing pattern with all the fast fashion and the rise of the online retailers, and also how would you define the second life for old garments? Over to you, Nalini.
Thank you. So, even 30, 35 years ago, waste pickers, when you look at the history of what they picked up, they were called rag pickers. Rag means cloth, right? I mean, they were called rag pickers. Now we say, no, they're not rag pickers, it's waste pickers, because the kind of material they have started using or collecting has kind of changed. So I was just talking to some of the waste pickers recently, even this morning. So they would say when they would go door to door, I mean, on the street picking up, people would call them and give them saris. And then they would give the petticoats, they would give the blouses, they would give even, the in dhoti, panche is very common then. So they would give that and they would keep whatever they could use for themselves and then give out the rest. They would go to and sell it in the market. Even now we have some of the hubs in Bangalore where old cloth is purchased. So she would say that the neck of the shirt, they would cut it and then pull out the threads. And it was all physically, they used to do this work. And that thread again would go for recycling. So once that was happening because it was all cotton material. So now there is no cotton material. As soon as the nylons and everything was introduced, this whole tradition changed. What happened? Then the trading started. They would go to homes and then give bartan or a vessel and then take the saris back and then sell it again. So that whole circular economy that one saw when only cloth, cotton was there, that really kind of went away. And it also kind of took away a whole lot of workers who were engaged in pulling out the threads and making living out of it. So the other thing they were telling me was those days, even if there was a small damage, right, in the cloth, they would darn, they would know how to stitch it, and then they would sell it, and people would buy. Today, and especially the one which new ones, which were while the person who was servicing for you to iron the clothes has burnt some part of the shirt, they would just stitch it up and then actually use it. So Annama today was telling me, even today, those kind of things come when they stitch it, even our own children don't use it. Even a little bit of damaged one. So they have to go and purchase it. And the other thing is also there's so much excess of shirts and the clothes that are available, which is sold on the footpath today for 100 rupees, 50 rupees, sari. Last week I was asking one of the waste picker, every day you're wearing such beautiful saris, why don't you put a fall? She's saying this sari costed me 50 rupees. Why will I spend 150 rupees for a fall? So the kind of throwaway culture has increased, and still there is an economy that is running, but it's a whole different ways of doing it. And once a polyester is wasted, it cannot be used for your rags also. Well, cotton, even after usage, you could use it for rag. You would use it. I remember my mother used to use it. Even I use my dupattas in the kitchen because it's really nicely cleans up your kitchen. But that kind of a culture is now not there. So we buy a special cloth for cleaning your countertops and so on. So that kind of economy has gone. So even waste pickers who are picking up cloth are not doing it now. Whatever comes to dry waste collection center, that's another story, we can talk about it. So the introduction of nylon and polyester really changed the whole culture of recycling in cloth waste.
Thank you, Nalini. In fact, I wanted to read a small paragraph from this book, Recycling Indian Clothing, by Lucy Norris, where she says, old clothes are multi-layered composite objects made of fibers and fabrics, shapes and colors and patterns, overlaid with memories, smells, and association. A singularized garment whose history recalls for one woman a lifetime of family life may re-enter the market stripped bare, leaving only the color and fabric to be reinvented once again as an ethnic textile cushioning of a Western woman's sofa. I know this paragraph is a little bit gendered, but any which ways it sets the context of how it was in the past. And now, before I move to Krishna, may I please request Krishna to actually release the report by pressing, sharing screen, so that we release the report and then I come to you. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you very much for doing this. So, Krishna, my question to you is, a recent Deccan Herald article in 2021 actually stated that textiles are the third largest source of municipal waste. Up to 73% of textile end up in landfills and are not recycled, and that the textile industry is the third biggest consumer of plastic. Now, having said that, Krishna, I know in 2018 at Ward 1112, you actually piloted an experiment called Hasiru Batte with Hasiru Dala. Can you share briefly about why did you do that? And may I please request you to speak either in Kannada or Hindi, whatever language you're comfortable in. Krishna, आपने 2018 में एक experiment किया था हसिरू बट्टे करके, उसके बारे में आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे तो?
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಅದೇ ಮೇಡಮ್, ನಾವು ಸುಮಾರು ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಕೆಲಸನೇ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿರುವಾಗ ಈ ಬಟ್ಟೆದು ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಯಾರನ್ನು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿಲ್ವಲ್ಲ. ಆ ಟೈಮ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಮತ್ತೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಗಳು ಅಮೆರಿಕದಿಂದ ಬಂದ್ರು. ಹಸಿರುದಲ್ಲ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಹಸಿರು ಬಟ್ಟೆ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಪೈಲಟ್ ಮಾಡೋಣ ಅಂತ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ತರನು ನಮಗೂ ತುಂಬಾ ಕಷ್ಟ ಇತ್ತು. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಸಡನ್ ಅಂತ ಯಾರನ್ನು ಬಟ್ಟೆ ಕೊಡೋದಿರ್ಲಿ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕ್ಲೀನ್ ಆಗಿ ಕೊಡಿ, ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ಕಷ್ಟ ಇತ್ತು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಸುಮಾರು ಒಂದು 3-4 ವಾರ ಬರೀ ಒಂದು ಬ್ಲಾಕ್, ಎಂಟೈರ್ ವಾರ್ಡ್ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದು ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೀ ಅವೇರ್ನೆಸ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿವಿ. ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ನೀವು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಕ್ಲಾತ್ ನ ಸಪ್ರೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಕೊಡಿ, ಮಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಡ್ರೈ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಡಬೇಡಿ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕ್ಲೀನ್ ಆಗಿ ಕೊಡಿ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ತಿರ್ಗಾ ಯಾರಿಗಾದ್ರೂ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಸ್ಲಮ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋರಿಗೆ, ಇಲ್ಲಾಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಬಿಲ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಕಟ್ಟೋ ಕಾರ್ಯ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋರಿಗೆ, ಊರಿಂದ ಊರ್ ಬಂದಿರೋರಿಗೆ, ಇವ್ರಿಗೆಲ್ಲ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾವು ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಸಪ್ರೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಮಾಡಿ ಕೊಡೋಣ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಅವೇರ್ನೆಸ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿವಿ. ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಪಾಂಪ್ಲೆಟ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟು, ಆಮೇಲೆ ನಾಳೆ ಕಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಈ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಡೇನೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಪ್ರತಿ ಒಂದು ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ ಫುಲ್ಲು ಅನೌನ್ಸ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಸ್ಪೀಕರ್ ಹಾಕಿ ಗಾಡಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೋಗಿ ಸುತ್ತಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಈ ತರ ಸುಮಾರು ಒಂದು 3-4 ವಾರ ಆ ತರ ಮಾತಾಡಿ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು 3-4 ವಾರ ಕಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ. ಅಷ್ಟು ಕಷ್ಟಪಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ಕಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ರಿಯಲಿ ಹ್ಯಾಪಿ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಅಷ್ಟು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ರೆಸ್ಪಾನ್ಸ್ ಬಂತು ಸಿಟಿಸನ್ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ. ಅಷ್ಟು ಕ್ಲೀನ್ ಆಗಿ ಪ್ಯಾಕ್ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಟ್ರು, ಐರನ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ವಾಶ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಅದು ಯಾವ ತರ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಬಟ್ಟೆಗಳು ನಾನೇ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡೆ, ನಾನು ಹಾಕೊಳ್ಳಕ್ಕೆ, ಅಷ್ಟು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಅದನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡು ಹೋಗಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಸ್ಲಮ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋರಿಗೆ ಅಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಕೊಡುವಾಗ ಎಲ್ಲ ಖುಷಿಯಾಗಿ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರು. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಬ್ರ್ಯಾಂಡೆಡ್ ಬಟ್ಟೆಗಳು, ಆದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನೋ ಯೂಸ್, ಅದು ಬಿಸಾಕ್ಬೇಕು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅದು ತುಂಬಾ ಹೊಸದಾಗಿ ಇತ್ತು ಅದು. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಆ ತರ ಬಟ್ಟೆಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ತಗೋಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಸುಮಾರು ದುಡ್ಡು ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ತಗೊಂಡು ಅದನ್ನ ತಿರ್ಗಾ ನಾವು 3 ಕ್ಯಾಟಗರಿ ವೈಸ್ ಅದನ್ನ ಸೆಗ್ರಿಗೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ ನಾವು. ಗುಡ್ ಕ್ವಾಲಿಟಿ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ರಿಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡೋ ಕ್ವಾಲಿಟಿ ಅಂಡ್ ವೆರಿ ಬ್ಯಾಡ್ ಕ್ವಾಲಿಟಿ, ಆ ತರ 3ನ ಮಾಡಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರೋದೆಲ್ಲ ಹಂಗೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿವಿ. ಚಿಕ್ಕ ರಿಪೇರಿ ಇರೋದು ಮೇಡಮ್ ಹೇಳೋ ತರನೇ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಟಿಚಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಂತದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ. ಆದ್ರೆ ತುಂಬಾ ನಮ್ಗೆ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಚಾಲೆಂಜ್ ಇರೋದು ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ದಟ್ಟಿ ಕ್ಲಾತ್. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇವಾಗ ತನಕ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಂತ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ತಿರ್ಗಾ ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಫೀಲ್ಡ್ಗೆ ಹೋಯ್ತು. ಅದು ಅಷ್ಟು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದ್ ಕೂಡ ಅದು ಎಂಟೈರ್ ಒಂದು ಸೊಲ್ಯೂಷನ್ ನಮ್ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ಕೊಡಕ್ಕಾಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದು ನಮ್ಗೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಬೇಜಾರಾಯ್ತು. ನಿಮ್ಗೆಲ್ಲ ಗೊತ್ತಿರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಮ ಪರಿಸರ, ಅದ್ರ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಹಾಲಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಟೆನ್ಗಳು ಎವ್ರಿ ಡೇ ಇಂದ ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಫೀಲ್ಡ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಬರ್ನಿಟ್. ನೀವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು ಎಲ್ಲ ಮೆಕ್ಯಾನಿಕ್ ಶಾಪ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಕೆಲಸ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಇಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬೆಂಕಿ ಹಚ್ಚಿಬಿಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡುವಾಗ ಓವರ್ ಆಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಒಂದು ಸೊಲ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಅಂತೂ ಬಟ್ಟೆಗೆ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಇವಾಗ ನಮ್ಮ ಆಸೆ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಪೇಪರ್ ಇರ್ಲಿ, ಪ್ಲಾಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಇರ್ಲಿ, ಎಷ್ಟೋ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ಗಳಿಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಒಂದು ರೀಸೈಕ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಇದೆ. ಆ ತರ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ಕೂಡ ಒಂದು ರೀಸೈಕ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಓವರ್ ಆಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ಇನ್ ಮುಂದೆ ಈ ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಫೀಲ್ಡ್ ಹೋಗೋ ಬಟ್ಟೆಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ತಡಿಸ್ಬೋದು. ಮತ್ತೆ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರೋ ಬಟ್ಟೆಗಳನ್ನ ಏನೋ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕರ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ ಅದೇ ಒಂದು ತಗೊಂಡು ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಇನ್ನ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಇಂಪ್ರೂವ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ಗಾಗಿರ್ಲಿ ಪ್ಲಸ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಲೈಫ್ಗೆ ಕೂಡ ಇರ್ಲಿ ಇಂಪ್ರೂವ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಕ್ಕೆ ಇದು ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ. ನಿನ್ನೆ ಕೂಡ ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ನಳಿನಿ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ಈ ತರ ಒಂದು ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕರ್ ನಲ್ಲಿಂದ 20 ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿ ಲಿಂಕ್ ಇದೆ ಅವ್ರ ಲೈಫ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ. ಆ ತರ ಇರುವಾಗ ಒಂದೊಂದು ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗೋದನ್ನ ನಮ್ ಕೈಯಿಂದ ಅದನ್ನ ತೆಗೆದು ನಾವು ಏನೋ ಒಂದು ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಇನ್ನೂ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಜನರಿಗೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಸಿಗ್ಬೋದು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವ್ರ ಲೈಫ್ ಕೂಡ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಅಂತ ನಮ್ಮ ಆಸೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ರೀಸೈಕ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಸೇರಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪರಿಸರಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಹೊಣೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಒಂದು ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ನಾವು ಕೊಡಬಹುದಂತ ಈ ಟೈಮ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಅನ್ಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀನಿ ಮೇಡಮ್.
Thank you, Krishna. So Nalini, if you can also translate a little bit about what Krishna said and then continue to answer your next question. Post this experiment, you decided to audit the waste that was coming in at the dry waste collection center in 2019 and in 2021. So if you can also briefly share the findings and explain presently what are the destinations for textile waste post-sorting at dry waste collection centers? Nalini, you're on mute.
Sorry. Lot of waste was coming into dry waste collection centers, and we wanted to see how and what we can do. So we joined hands with some of the students who had come from America, Hasiru Dala, and all of us really planned out, and we decided to collect cloth separately, and we had to educate lot of people on what is the, just wait, I've finished the translation and then you can.
Okay.
So what he was saying is we had to go and educate everybody that you have to clean that and please give it separately. And they didn't take the whole ward, but only one block we took. But that itself, one whole week of awareness happened. And we also said how it should be given. And even previous day of collection, we went house to house and told everybody. And we got a lot of good material in a very good place. And we divided them into 3 different categories. One, something that can be usable, something that needs repairs, and something that is absolutely not usable. So, he said the cloth that came was very, very good quality. So even I wore it and I took it to the slum. It is all branded. If we have to buy this branded product, it's very expensive. So, but for the people who have thrown, they didn't want it. They threw. But because we were able to collect it nicely, we were able to give it to them. And what he was talking about is non-usable one. So he said we felt very bad that after all that struggle and work, we had to send some part of it to landfill, and you all know how bad the landfill is today, and we felt very sad that we had to send it to landfill because, and even now we feel that we don't have 100% solution for post-consumer waste, and that is really sad. I was sad about that, but this experiment has really done well. So do you want to show the film that before I go to the findings, please?
Sure. Rohini or Akbar, may I please request you to play the film?
This is a film that Krishna chose to make for COP this year, and everybody was making a lot of videos for plastic, but Krishna felt he wants to do a video for cloth because there is not much awareness about the cloth waste anywhere. So I want to talk about cloth waste, and he chose to do this, and it was played in the main hall of COP. Thank you. Okay, we can come back to the film later. Can we do that?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would like to talk about the study itself that Pinky was talking about. So actually, most of the people know Almitra Patel. So when Almitra Patel came to us one day and said, "What is your major problem in your dry waste collection center?" And we said, "The cloth waste. We don't have anything in cloth waste." She said, "Okay, I'm going to Jaipur. So why don't you just do a study and tell me what is the problem with the cloth waste?" And that is the first time we took on this, and it's long time ago, 2017. And in that study, we showed we actually segregated for 3 days, 10th, 11th, and 12th of January 2017 we did, and we physically did the segregation and saw what has come, what has not come. And so she wanted to take it to Jaipur and see if some, some recycling can happen. But that kind of triggered us a lot of thinking, because there was a lot of cloth. If it was given properly, we could have really used it well. But that did not happen. So that is why the Hasiru Batte model, we tried if we can kind of see if we collected it better, can we use it? And after that, we did a study. Can you just put the slide, please? So this study was published long time ago on our blog, but nobody took notice of it because nobody talked about cloth waste there. And also again, another Hasiru Batte also we had put it up on our social media. We had put it up on our, even on our blog, but that time also this was not a very hot topic to talk, so a lot of people didn't read it. So in 2019 audit, what we did was in a huge way, and we took up 4 specific wards, and the reason why we took the specific ward is based on the number of households. We wanted to take something smaller, like Shantinagar with 6,000, and then we went up to Bengaluru, which is 31,183 households are there. So what we really looked at physical auditing was 14.5% of the waste is non-usable, and 85.5% is usable. This was in a way, it was positive that you can give a little more life for those garments if collected better. And so what happened was usable clothes. We had male clothing and female clothing, and children's clothing. The difference was of number of pieces. The number of pieces we did was about 1,410 pieces we did, and out of which 36% was of the clothes from male, and 30% female clothes, and 33% children's clothes. This is also a little surprising, not a lot of significant difference, but we expected there will be more children's clothes. But I think that gets recycled within homes and families. I think that is the reason why we did not see so much. Can you go to the next thing? So next. So when you really look at, we again did the same study in 2021. The number of dry waste collection centers that we were running is much higher. And we thought this might give us a better, numbers in terms of citywide, what would be it. And what we also realized is the first 4 that we had taken, except one Pina, the rest of them are also mostly high income groups, and there was 3.5% cloth waste overall. But when you look at today's DWCC, it is overall it's looking less, 1% cloth waste, but in terms of number it is quite huge. Next one, please. So what we observed in this whole thing is there is a lot of, and we also did a lot of going and meeting people who are using textile cloth. The picture that you're seeing here is of in Tumkur. There's a unit in Tumkur. So we saw a lot of people using the post-production waste. For any recycling that we saw, it was all post-production waste. They would bring it from the factories, and then they do it for the filling. But when we asked, why don't you do the same thing for post-consumer waste, they said there is no consistency in the kind of material that comes. When the factories gives out the waste, we know what is the kind of quality that is coming up, and they all preferred male clothing than female clothing, because male clothing mostly it is cotton and terracotta, and it's not true with the others. So these were some of the things that we got observations. So we decided not to too much dwell on the post-production waste, because there's a lot of experiment that has been done in this, and there's a lot of work also has been done. For example, in Tirupur, all the banyan material that comes out and that is used in all this, they pull it out and send it to all the mechanic shops. And that kind of a thing is economy was really working well. But when even the cost of it was also was working well, that even people in Bangalore would get those in the clothes, and then they would remove it and supply it. But now the cost of transportation has become so much. So in Bangalore, such units are not. So in the post-production part, when we looked at it, the major problem that we had was, lack of systematic collection. When we actually did the collection separately, we realized the same cloth which was coming to dry waste was contaminated and it could not be used. But a separate collection like this really helped in actually looking at and reusing it and extending the life of the cloth, that the garments that was there. And so the problem is also the blends. We can't understand what the blends of the textiles right now. So it becomes very difficult only for non-usable material. And also the repair work that we did it and sold also, repairs like ironing, damages and all doesn't, it goes as non-usable. But some things where stitches have come out, we can restitch it and send it. And there is a huge market for it. And if you go, of course, many of the markets you already know in Bangalore, there are hubs of these cloth markets. And also they go to different vendors. Vendors go to different camps in the construction labor and sell it. Since the pandemic, the construction part, you can buy it for 100 rupees, 200 rupees shirts, very good quality shirts. So those are happening. The rest we are sending it to RDF. When we send RDF multi-layered plastic to this was 2014 was the first experiment we did in South India, probably sending it to co-processing. And there 112 tons we had sent, and we had made a combination of little bit of cloth and little bit of MLP and rubber. So the whole, the whole economic, calorific value, when we looked at it, was a little over 5,500 kilocalories. So that worked. But this is not an efficient system. That we are very clear in our observation. The cost of sending it to cement kilns is so high that is really not good. And in the post-consumer waste, wherever we went to, we asked, knocked the doors to take our waste. There is a huge supply chain for this also. There are some in Gujarat and some in Rajasthan. And both these people said, we prefer cloth coming from outside. So they were importing cloth. They were importing garments that was used and thrown from outside, but they were not willing to pick it up from us because of the contamination in dry waste collection center. So that is the solution that we need to bring. Next one, please. Should I go ahead for the recommendation, or will I? Yeah.
No, I'll come back to you, Nalini, on that. So thank you so much for sharing the data. I think, as you can see, you have rightly made a point for infrastructure for post-consumer textile recycling. And another thing that you very clearly highlighted was the importance of segregation of textile waste, so that it does not compromise the quality of tradable textiles. Now, Trina, before I come to you, I would like to just tell all the audience that in 2021, the then Minister of Textile actually had stated that Karnataka is the garment capital of India. I know this is a very contested tag, but any which ways, and Karnataka accounts for almost about 20% of India's garment production. And the textile and apparel sector in Karnataka accounts for 2/3 of the state's industrial output. apart from being a major source of employment. And Karnataka also has a textile policy, which is 2019 to 24. And the mission statement very clearly states to retain Karnataka's position as a textile capital of India. And another important thing that the document states is that they also want Karnataka to be a significant manufacturer and exporter of technical textiles. So there are two streams: traditional textile, like what Nalini talked about, which is cotton, jute, and loom, and all that. And the second one is the technical textiles. And with technical textiles are basically engineered products, and they define a functionality. So for instance, your spandex, your nomex, all of these things are which are used in various different forms, whether it is, as what to say, in sportswear, in sports apparel, I'm just giving you in agricultural products as tarpaulin. It gives you a lot of, because the reason why it is it's also high demand is because these are non-conventional textiles, and basically it has excellent tenacity, insulation, and thermal resistance, and that industry is growing, and which means that the waste that comes out of it will also be growing. So having said that, the question that I would like to ask you is, what is your reaction to this particular study? And if you look at the textile policy, because the textile policy also talks about the fact that they want to be zero defect, and they're basically hinting at a circular approach. So from your experience at CAIF, what do you think has been working and not working? And if you can give specific examples around it.
Sure. Thanks, Pinky, for the question. And firstly, kudos to the Hasiru Dala team for this report. It really does cover or throw light on an aspect of data that's really lacking in the area. So really providing a starting point to how do we tackle the problem, how big is the problem, and kind of giving us some indicative answers on which we can build solutions. Coming to what is working, what is not working, we at CAIF very recently have launched a program around closing the loop on textile waste. And as we embarked on the journey, over the last couple of months, we have taken this massive exercise of really studying the entire landscape of textile waste. And I just would like to, kind of share a couple of things that have come up through the research, where we've spoken to about 60 to 70 stakeholders across the entire textile value chain, right? Starting from brands, manufacturers, waste worker organizations like Hasiru Dala itself, waste workers like Krishna himself, and so on, innovators, etc., and the entire ecosystem. I think firstly, what kind of the study validates is our understanding that post-consumer waste is kind of like a black hole. So, the first insight that kind of came is when in our conversations is both pre-consumer and post-consumer waste are two completely different ball games. While in the pre-consumer side, there is some kind of a system. It might come with its flaws of, fair labor practices, middlemen, opacity, all of that. But having said that, there is some kind of a system. And moreover, there is also a larger acknowledgement from brands and manufacturers now, a growing acknowledgement that this is a problem. This is obviously, very closely related to something Nalini said, that this is kind of in direct control of the brands and manufacturers. So if I had to say, it's at least comparatively a easier problem to solve. It's within the, factory gates, it's within the shop gates. There's uniformity in the kind of waste. So at least where the waste is being collected, or rather being generated, what can you do with it, and create that kind of a mechanism. So over the last 2-3 years, there are a lot of these kind of initiatives. There are big brands kind of following the EPR guidelines that the Europe has mandated, or trying to prepare for that kind of implementation, and putting the spotlight really on how do we tackle textile waste. But this is mostly, I would say, in the pre-consumer post-production side. Now moving to the post-consumer side, what I started with, it's really a black hole where it's really about starting from the scratch. Now, while there are ad hoc channels for waste disposal, the onus is really on the consumer to find, okay, which NGO or who do you pass it on to, typically passed on to someone, in the family, friends, or, people who might be working at our households and etc. Those are the usual channels for, disposing textile waste. What this gives, and I think this is what, connects with the report, is that the fact that 85% of the clothing that has been collected is reusable really throws or gives a very strong signal that there is a huge untapped potential that we're letting go. Here, the problem is, of course, much more complicated. There is a lot of diversity in the kind of waste, whether it is the type of garment, the materials, blended, virgin, all of that. Plus, the sources are all over, much more spread out. And I think what really a report like this and the work that Hasiru Dala does is really signaling us to how can we leverage the already existing DWCC system to build on it and look at textile waste as a stream that is economical, feasible, and contributing to planet as well as people positive outcomes. That's the kind of approach that we at CIF are taking at tackling the post-consumer textile waste model. So really looking at, okay, how do we ensure a collection mechanism that really plays to the strengths that is already existing in the DWCCs, the kind of foot soldiers, the kind of networks, the access that is already established. How do we layer a textile waste mechanism on that, if I can say so? And then also what kind of came up in our, and this was in conversation with waste workers and waste entrepreneurs like Krishna, was that while the collection is the starting point, it's again, in comparison, it's a more simpler first step. Given that the expertise they've built on, that is something that they will be able to figure out. But the next step, I would say, is if collection is the foundation, then sorting is your secret sauce. The better the sorting, the better the sophistication in sorting, the better responsive it is to industry needs. That is how we realize value, and that is how we create economic value. That is what kind of creates that entire incentive structure for the waste operator to even enter textile waste. And that's really at the heart of what we are looking to solve. That how do we create a mechanism that looks at collection, trains capacities for sorting, and then also kind of provides that kind of market linkage of, if you've collected the cloth waste and whatever categories, Krishna also kind of touched upon it, good quality, minor quality, and even the really, really bad quality. What is the best possible channel for it to kind of go into? I think that's pretty much the same principles with which plastic waste works. There is a taker at the end of it, and hence there is an incentive to really think. And that is really the kind of work that we want to bring on ground to realize that, okay, what is the economic value that is going untapped? How much of that waste can be minimized from leakage into the environment? And also at the same time, how can we empower waste workers, waste entrepreneurs who really form the backbone to take up this kind of work and see a good livelihood opportunity in it?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Trina. I think that really sets the ball for thinking of how are we looking at actually channelizing this important resource. And what I missed out in terms of the technical textiles segment, just very briefly, in Meditech, you have the diapers, sanitary napkins. In mobile tech, you have the airbags, the nylon tire cords, and the airline disposables. In the ecotech, you have, in the pack tech, you have wrapping fabrics, woven sacks, and then you have, in the pro tech, you have the bulletproof jackets and the fire retardant apparels and high visibility clothing. In the sports techs, as you all know, you have the swimwear, you have the artificial turf, you have the parachute fabrics, you have the tents, and you have the sports nets. In agrotech, you actually have the fishing nets, mulch mats, and in the building, you have the tarpaulins, the cotton canvas, and all the canopies that you're looking at. In the cloth tech, you obviously have zip fasteners, garments, umbrella cloth, and shoelaces. And in the geotech, you have the conveyor belts and the bolting cloth. And in home tech, you have the mattresses, pillow fillings, stuffed toys, blinds and carpets. So you can see the range of textiles that the technical textiles is catering to, and all this have a potential to become waste. So having said that, Krishna, do you have any recommendations from your experience of working with textile waste?
ಕೃಷ್ಣ, ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಯಾವ ತರ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಮುಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಯಾವ ತರ ನಾವು ಮಾಡಬಹುದು, ಇದನ್ನ ಹೇಗೆ ತಗೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಹೇಳ್ತೀರಾ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮನಸ್ಸಿರೋದು?
ಅದೇ ಮೇಡಮ್, ಸುಮಾರು ಸಲ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಅದೇ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು ನಾವು ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ನೋಡಿ, ನಮಗ್ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋ ತರ ಕ್ಲಾತ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಪೀಸ್ ಕೂಡ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ. ಅದು ಕೆಲಸ ನಮ್ದು ಇಲ್ಲದಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟು ವೇಸ್ಟ್, ಇಷ್ಟು ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಫೀಲ್ಡ್ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಬಟ್ ನಮ್ದೇನ್ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ಇವಾಗ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ದೇಶನೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಸೊಲ್ಯೂಷನ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಬಟ್ಟೆಗೆ. ಅದು ವಾಶ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಮತ್ತೆ ಅದು ಡ್ರೆಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಆಮೇಲೆ ದಾನ ಸಪ್ರೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ತೆಗೆದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ತಿರ್ಗಾ ಹೊಸ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ರೀಸೈಕ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆ ತರ ಒಂದು ಆಸಕ್ತಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ. ಅದು ನಮ್ದು ಇಲ್ಲೇನಾದ್ರು ಆ ತರ ಒಂದು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿನ ಅದನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡು ಅದು ಮುಂದೆ ನಡ್ಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಂತ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಓವರ್ ಆಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋದು ನಾವೇ. ಆ ತರ ಇರುವಾಗ ಏನೋ ಒಂದು ಆ ತರ ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ನಾವೇ, ನಮ್ಮ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಪೀಕರ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿನೇ ಅದು ತಗೊಂಡು ಆ ಫ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ರಿನ ರನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಇಲ್ಲಾಂದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಬಟ್ಟೆನು ರೀಸೈಕ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಆ ತರ ಒಂದು ಮಾಡೋದು. ಇವಾಗ ನೋಡಿ ಮೇಡಮ್, ಓವರ್ ಆಲ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ಅದು ಪೈಲಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗನೇ ಟೋಟಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಅದು ಬಟ್ಟೆದು ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬೇರೆ ತರ ಇತ್ತು. ಎಲ್ಲಾದ್ರೂ ನಾವು ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತೀವಿ, ನೀವು ಎಲ್ಲ ತಗೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದು ಕೊಟ್ಬಿಡಿ ಅಂತ, ಇಲ್ಲಾಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಜಾಗ ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಇಕ್ಕಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಆದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬೇರೆ ತರ ಒಂದು ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ನಾವು ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ. ದ ಡೋರ್ ಟು ಡೋರ್ ಕಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ವೆರಿ ಕ್ಲಾತ್ ಅಂತ. ನೀವು ಡ್ರೈ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಮಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಡಿ, ಸಪ್ರೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ನೀವು ಎತ್ತಿಕ್ಕಿ ತಿಂಗ್ಳಿಗೆ ಒಂದ್ಸಲ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ 2 ಸಲ ಎಂಟೈರ್ ವಾರ್ಡ್ ಆ ತರ ಎಲ್ಲ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರೇ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ ನಾವು. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ವಾರ್ಡ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಡ್ರೈ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ ಇದೆ, ಎಲ್ಲಾ ವಾರ್ಡ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ತೀವಿ ನಾವು. ಆ ತರ ಇರುವಾಗ ಇದು ಬಟ್ಟೆ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅದ್ರ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಮಿಕ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ತಿರ್ಗಾ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ನೇ ಅದು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬಟ್ಟೆದೇ ಒಂದು ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ನಾವು ಮಾಡಿ ಈ ತರ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಒಂದು ಪೀಸ್ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಫೀಲ್ಡ್ ಹೋಗಲ್ಲಂಗೆ ರೀಸೈಕ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕೆಲಸಗಳು ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಂತ ನನ್ನ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಒಂದು ಡ್ರೀಮ್ ಮೇಡಮ್, ಅದು ಒಂದು ಆಸೆ ಅದು.
Thank you, Krishna. I think you rightly said our vision should be no textile waste to landfills. Nalini, I know that Mr. Sarfraz Khan is not here. So while you translate what Krishna said, I would also like you to, apart from sharing your recommendations, is to visualize how can BBMP think of a textile waste policy, or if not BBMP, Karnataka think of a textile waste policy, and then creating first of its sort for the country, and also aligning it with the existing textile policy and with the existing PWM, SWM policy. Also, I know you've talked about creating reverse logistics, but how do we also look at textile-based data as an important source? And would then CPCB become the regulator, as in the case of PWM or SWM rules? If you can just reflect on all of these, that would be nice.
Thank you. So I'll just say what Krishna said. His dream is that no waste, cloth waste goes to landfill. So we have so many of us, the waste pickers and informal sector, we all have to get together to do it. And his dream is, he also feels that there are a lot of technology that is already there, existing in other countries. We have to bring it, and we have to ourselves have to do the recycling. The other aspect he said is there is a lot of experiment where you ask people to come and give us the material. You come and drop off your clothes. But what we have done, we have dry waste collection center in each of the ward. But what we did was we said we will come to your door and pick it up. So that had really increased the volume. That can be increased volume can come from there. That's what he was talking about. And his dream is no textile to landfill. And what I would like to kind of talk here also, the whole idea of decentralized dry waste collection center, that a concept that was brought in by a think tank in Bangalore, Solid Waste Management Roundtable, but we operationalize it because Hasiru Dala works with waste pickers. We were able to operationalize and scale up. and show how it can be done. So once this DWCC was there, we were able to aggregate many things. For example, coconut shell never had a market. We created a market. We talked to people, and they started picking up the coconut shell, to the extent that what was going to landfill. Actually, that is why in Bangalore we put coconut shell in dry waste, not in the wet waste, because it has more value than going it into the composting. So that created another material that could go. In 2014, we showed that 114 tons of BBMP and Zuari cement made a understanding, and we did that to show that. So now it's become a regular practice. This has all happened because there is a dry waste collection system. And thermocol today. Thermocol also, I know Ramakanji is also on the call, and he has also pushed a lot. But what really has brought in is the dry waste collection center, where the aggregation of thermocol happened, and that's why there is a business. There is similarly for beds. So I feel that BBMP and Karnataka government has to, one, focus on the collection system, strengthen this DWCCs and other things that they are doing it in other cities also. Dry waste collection center as a concept started, but it saw in Bangalore. But in 2017, it was entered into the budget of the state. So that kind of an institutionalization of collection is very important. Separate collection of this will definitely bring in better recovery of the resources. So I think that needs to be done. And I think we already have the infrastructure and putting this process, and we have already done it in Domlur in 2019 and shown that is possible, and we have to scale up. And the second thing I would say, definitely many people are talking, and we are also talking about EPR for textile industry for surely. But I also want to talk about we don't have to wait for EPR. We feel that most of these material is synthetic fabric, that are like polyester, acrylic, nylon, and all these are done by non-renewable fossil fuel, which are actually a derivative of petroleum. So our argument is this can be really brought in under plastic waste management rules itself till such time that EPR is introduced. So these are some of our, I feel that government can do, and we all as citizens and organizations and businesses can work with the government to bring in a policy, because any policy, everybody has to be involved. Just government cannot do it, especially with waste. Unless all the stakeholders are involved in the policy making, you will not get a good policy. So I feel that state and local government, we should work with it. It's unfortunate Mr. Sarfraz Khan is not here, and he was very keen to be here. We will go and talk to him about this study and show him the details. So I think that is what we have to look forward to.
Thank you, Nalini. I think we'll move, because we have 10 minutes. We have 8 minutes more. Quickly, question and answers. Okay, so the question Mr. Ramakant has asked, you've not mentioned anything about oil stain cotton waste from service station and other industries. Mr. Ramakant, this data was only from the dry waste collection centers, and Krishna or Nalini, if you want to add anything to it.
Krishna already mentioned it, that they are burning it, and we have to find a solution for it. I don't think non-usable textile, there is any solution. Of course, it can go to cement kilns because it has high calorific value. Maybe going to cement kiln is better than open burning. But at this point of time, what we are working with Trina is to look at what solution can we bring for that 15% of the waste that we don't have answers to today.
So, Trina, next question to you is by Sanjay Chauhan. He's saying, any learning on if the government can provide some sort of support in managing the post-consumer textile waste?
Sure. I think from a government or a policy lens, the creation of an enabling environment is significant for a post-consumer textile waste management system. What we can look at is, I think, two very tangible things that's mentioned in the report is, of course, EPR in the long term, and also looking at, revisiting plastic waste management to kind of open and broaden the understanding of how textiles can kind of fit into that. Having said that, I think also investments or say incentives to waste entrepreneurs like Krishna that kind of allows them to really establish and create that collection and segregation mechanism. This can be through capital instruments, this can be through capacity, or any kind of things which push and create that enabling and infrastructure and environment for them, is going to go a long way in actually proving and building that evidence that such a system works. Second, I think also just kind of extending on the point that regarding EPR for to create accountability with brands. I think right now, as I had mentioned earlier, focuses on the pre-consumer. How do we kind of, is there a policy or is there some kind of regulatory framework that can encourage or even, get brands into the conversation around post-consumer? Because the problem of textile waste is kind of like a chained problem. So while collection sorting, really going into recycling back into yarn will require brand buy-in, vis-a-vis manufacturer buy-in, recycler buy-in. So if you go to a recycler, they'll say, who do I produce for if a manufacturer doesn't take it? And if you go to a manufacturer, they'll say, who do I produce for if the brand is not interested in recyclable, yarn? So I think that is where, a little bit of focus needs to kind of shift, that how can brands also look at post-consumer waste as an input feed for their next, clothing lines or, next collections, etc. And how can they be incentivized to look at it as something that they really focus on while sourcing.
Thank you, Trina. I think you rightly captured the pulse of the whole thing, which where you talked about, I mean, the most important thing being obviously separate stream of collection, but also capacity building, capital investments, access to technology, and of course, creating that whole accountability mechanism. And of course, to Nalini's point of data. Soumya is asking, Nalini, can shredded cloth be converted to RDF?
It can be converted to RDF for sure. The question is whether it is economically viable. One, and what is the calorific value? If you put nylon and all that, definitely calorific value will be high, and we have tried the TCC cement about it. But the cost, who will bear the cost is the usual question. But I think if you have some alternative to co-processing would be better. That is what we are trying to find other solutions, and hopefully next year, by now, we'll work with CAIF, with Trina and her group, and we'll be able to tell you some solutions. We are trying few solutions. Shredding of cloth was a big business in Bangalore long time back. It was again informal sector, but today there's not a one single shredder for cloth in Bangalore. We have done the research as far as we know, and we want to do more and check it out. So shredding of cloth is not as easy as shredding of plastic. So it has its own challenges.
So thank you. I think there's somebody called anonymous attendee who's asking, how do we build or strengthen value chain for post-consumer cloth waste? And I think Nalini has briefly mentioned, and Krishna also has mentioned that. But Nalini, if you could re-answer this question, that would be nice.
I think like we always say, dry waste, please wash your plastic container after use. Please clean up your sachets before use and give it after use and give it to us. Similarly, for cloth also, there is a systematic way of collection. So once a systematic way of collection is there, there is a second market for it. And then, of course, you have to find solutions. So for the absolutely non-usable, this right now, what is non-usable, usable becomes non-usable after a certain time. So collecting back that material is also important. So collection system is the key. And also I want to say, we say, yeah, there are entrepreneurs, they're doing well. It's not like big entrepreneurs who can come and take over the market. That much money is not there. The entrepreneurs who put in their hard work, sweat, they are the people who can actually make money out of it for themselves. And if we go there and we start doing it, it's tough. And Trina just talked about how to invest in them, how to, the whole change should be encouraged to change the way they work today, because the work is good, but the way they work, we need to change. And that's what we need to do.
So thank you so much, Krishna, Trina, and Nalini. We just have 1 minute, and we'll have to, it's 4:59. So we'll have to close the session. In case you have more questions, please write to us about your questions. But I think as citizens, today we have something very important before us. I mean, just like how we are now being conscious about fast fashion and are actually demanding some kind of sustainability from the brands, both from what they're putting out to about addressing social inequalities and labor issue. I think when we put out our textile waste out, I think we also have to be conscious about how we are putting out, why we're putting out, and in the hope that it's reaching the right channels. And we have to start having more conversations around it. And I think we must look at demanding for a separate EPR policy. But for now, as Nalini said, like, let's push for textile waste to be incorporated under the plastic waste policy. So thank you very much. And thank you to the entire Hasiru Dala team who has worked on this report. And special shout out to Akbar for also designing this particular report, and to all the and Aishwarya for actually collecting the data. There are many people who have worked on this report, including Nalini Shekar, Karthik, Akbar, Vishwanath, and I have worked on it too. But we couldn't have done it if there was no collection from the Dry Waste Collection Center. So a huge shout out to all the Dry Waste Collection Center operators who actually worked for this particular report.
We have a historical data which may not be available anywhere.
Exactly. So and shout out to Rohini for managing the Zoom account, and Beulah who's going to be transcribing this webinar as well. And Akbar, thank you again. Thank you, Krishna. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much.